episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
The National Security Innovation Network, or NSIN, is the United States Department of Defense Program Office under the Defense Innovation Unit, ultimately that seeks to create new communities of innovators to solve national security problems. NSIN partners with national research universities and the venture capital community to reinvigorate civil-military technology collaboration, but as opposed to making investments in different technologies or R&D programs or startups, they focus primarily on human capital innovation, specifically developing and enabling innovators and human-centered networks. NSIN provides tools, training, and access to Department of Defense assets that ultimately allow entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs to help develop and commercialize various high-potential products of national interest. We're honored today to be joined by Morgan Plummer, who is the Managing Director of NSIN in the United States Department of Defense. Prior to his appointment as Managing Director, Morgan served as the Senior Advisor to the Director of NSIN and was a visiting research fellow at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. Prior to NSIN, Morgan served as a senior defense official in the Obama administration, and when he departed in 2016, he was the senior advisor to the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. As the senior public policy advisor and principal deputy of the department's chief human resource officer, he helped oversee a wide range of sweeping and progressive reforms, including the full integration of women into ground combat units, the repeal of the ban against open transgender service, and the Secretary of Defense Ash Carter's signature set of civilian and military personnel policy reforms, which were collectively referred to as the Force of the Future Initiative. Before his role in personnel and readiness, Morgan served as Special Assistant and Deputy Chief of Staff to the Undersecretary of the United States Army. While he was there, he focused on strategic planning, improving the organizational design of the Army headquarters, refining its various business processes. And he joined the Obama administration almost after 12 years serving as active duty in the United States Army, where he served a variety of command and staff assignments and completed multiple combat tours. Morgan has received numerous meritorious service and achievement medals. He's been decorated for valor, received the Office of the Secretary of Defense Medal for Exceptional Public Service. In addition to his military and civilian awards, Morgan holds a bachelor's degree from Michigan State University in criminal justice and law enforcement, a master's from Georgetown University in policy management, and he also served as executive director of the Defense Entrepreneur Forum, which is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling a culture of innovation in the U.S. national security community. All that saying, Morgan Plummer, welcome, and thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah, Ira, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Really excited to go on this journey with you and the viewers and talk a little bit more about NSIN and the kind of work that we do and sort of the new world of defense innovation that we're hoping to build.
Awesome. Awesome. Typically, we start off by handing our guests the floor just for a little bit to introduce and talk about themselves. If you can take us back a little bit to sort of your early days, or where you grew up, how you got interested in criminal justice, law enforcement,
Sure.
policy, and a little bit of your military journey as well. I think that would really set the stage for everything we're going to be discussing as far as NSIN.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, kind of, I think the Reader's Digest on me as a person is grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Naperville, which is now a fairly large-ish city, I guess, sort of by Illinois standards, certainly. So, it's interesting. For as long as I can remember, as a child, I felt like public service was an important thing, and I particularly remember as an early teenager. Having this idea sort of lodged deeply into my brain that, in many ways, having won the sort of international lottery of time and space of being in America, being born into the United States with the privileges that this country holds, that there was an element of that was as much a duty as a privilege. And really started to think about public service seriously as an early teenager. It was shortly thereafter, I think, that I sort of glommed onto this idea of a way to give back was through uniform service, through military service, back to the country, and decided to enroll in ROTC after playing with the idea of attending the Naval Academy and becoming a Marine Corps officer. Was definitely one of the things in my head, and I'm very thankful to my father, who, in probably very uncharacteristic advice, said, if you want to be a military officer, you'll have your entire life to do that, but you only get one shot at going to college and enjoying a real college experience. And the academy is a great school, but it's not college. And if you want to do that, that'll still be there for you afterwards. And I was really grateful. At the time, I deeply resented it, but in retrospect, deeply grateful for the advice. And ended up at Michigan State, where I enrolled in Army ROTC, did 4 years. At the time, I thought to myself, do the criminal justice degree, which had a high poli-sci sort of emphasis as part of it, a sort of policy part of it. Do that, do the Army, maybe become an FBI agent and sort of like work my way up the ranks and become part of the federal infrastructure, as it were. Everything changed in a pretty serious and dramatic way, I think, not just for me, but for millions of others on September 11th, which was my junior year. And that immediately made clear to me, that my time in the Army, that I would be commissioned a year later, that my time in the Army was going to be a very different experience than kind of what I had envisioned it was going to be, as sort of a, go in for 4 years, sort of do my service, fulfill that sort of internal sense of obligation, and then move on. From there, got commissioned at Michigan State, and then moved into active duty, was deployed about less than a year after my commissioning. Did a couple tours back and forth in Iraq, serving as a platoon leader, serving as an advisor to the Iraqi army during the surge, and then subsequently as a company commander. A lot of time in central Baghdad and up north in a place called Mosul, and then a town out by the Syrian border called Tal Afar, where H.R. McMaster and 3rd Cav, which was my unit at the time, earned a great deal of public attention anyway, from a speech at the time resulting from President Bush, kind of talking about the way that the surge was sort of panning out. From there, I came back, and my home station at the time was El Paso, Texas, and came back and did a couple of staff assignments, and then had a really good conversation with a battalion commander of mine who strongly thought that advanced civil schooling was the right next step for me, and encouraged me to take advantage of some of the Army programs that existed, and applied to Georgetown, and as part of that, as part of a graduate program through the Army. Went to Georgetown, finished my graduate degree in public policy. And then from there, as part of what the Army, what the military services call kind of a payback tour, to say like, hey, we sent you to go get this public policy degree, now like go use it on behalf of the military, for which I'm eternally grateful. I ended up on a utilization tour and was selected by Ash Carter's military assistant, who at the time, Ash Carter was serving as the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So this is the very beginning of the second term of the Obama administration. Served for a very brief time in Ash's front office with a great, just phenomenal group of people, and of course, what a person to learn from up close and personal, as Ash Carter, who's just spent a lifetime of public service and dedicated to the Department of Defense. And then had a really great opportunity, really facilitated by him and his staff, to join the Obama administration. And they correctly noted at the time, the folks who were advising me and mentoring me, that was a historic administration to be a part of, and if my inclination sort of lined that way, that was a great time to sort of make the switch. So made the decision to do that. Was in retrospect a really easy decision to make. And did just over 3 years with the Obama administration. And then obviously we had the change in administrations in 2016. And then took a little bit of a sabbatical, got off the treadmill as it were, because that was about at that point almost 15 straight years of sort of just moving as part of the national security architecture. And then a guy named Jay Harrison reached out to me, and he had just founded the MD5 National Security Technology Accelerator in partnership between, at the time, the Undersecretary of Defense for AT&L, which has now been dissolved into 2 offices, and the National Defense University. And it really was focused on this idea of there's a different way to think about defense innovation, and it really is about the people, and thinking about a core of entrepreneurship that can fundamentally redefine what has now been called the National Security Innovation Base. And Jay's pitch to me basically was, after taking a couple months off, from the changeover in administrations was basically, hey, I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I've been in and out of successful exits. You've been at the heart of the Pentagon bureaucracy. Come help me lead this thing, build a program office, that can last. And I served as Jay's deputy, as his COO and senior advisor for about a year. And then Jay let me know that he was going to move on to other things, and had the opportunity to fleet up and serve as the managing director. And for a wide variety of reasons, not the least of which to alleviate some branding confusion, we made the decision to kind of pivot the branding image of MD5 into the National Security and Innovation Network in May of 2019. So just about a year and a half ago. And here I sit in front of you and with all the folks watching. So
outstanding. I really appreciate that background. And
yeah, of course.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love hearing the journeys of our guests, and I was with you every step of the way there, and just very impressive and exciting so far. So I went through some of the materials that you sent me, and the Defense Innovation Unit, which I understand sort of NSIN sits within, it was termed, I think it was the Pentagon's Innovation Experiment, and sort of this transition from this organization that has, has a great amount of funding, but we think of it maybe as very expensive research, slow, inefficient, and you're making it cheap, fast, and very efficient. And if that involves using some of the things that my son does nowadays, whether they're hackathons or boot camps or whatever, we're going to utilize that. Can you take us a little bit through, you gave us a great introduction in history, sort of a little bit about where you're located, where your directives come from, how you decide what to work on. Walk us through a little bit of that, if you would.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in terms of where we sit in the what I'll call the sort of Byzantine organizational structure of the Pentagon. The Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, which is one of the 5, I guess now 6 undersecretariats within the Pentagon, now that AT&L has split into 2. So within research and engineering, the Undersecretary of Defense has several direct reporting agencies. One of them is DIU. And so my boss is Mike Brown, who serves as the director of DIU. And then his boss is the acting Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, a gentleman named Michael Kratsios, who is right now also dual-hatted as the country's chief technology officer, which was his original appointment, and formerly of Peter Thiel fame, where he served as Peter's chief of staff.
Sure.
So that's kind of where we sit, kind of in the hierarchy. So it's 2 steps between me and Michael Kratsios, which is great. A lot of direct access and a lot of ability to get, you kind of asked about directives, to get guidance, direction, and steerage, but also support from directly from the office of the Undersecretary, which has been terrific. And of course, the back office and shared back office that we have with the Defense Innovation Unit has been terrific for NSIN as a young organization to take advantage of. To your point about sort of how we think about, or question rather, about how we think about the things that we work on. So our approach really is rooted in this idea of being technology agnostic, but fundamentally solving pain points. Of what we use business verbiage, so we talk about DoD customers, even though they're sort of brother and sister DoD agencies, right? So for us, it really is about whether that pain point exists at the sort of 4-star major command level, or that pain point exists all the way down at the sort of base level, and everything in between. NSIN will potentially take on that problem if we have a program that's designed to try and produce a solution in a non-traditional way. And Ira, you named a couple of the different ways in which we tackle those kind of problem solving, and a lot of them are conventional, and a lot of them are going to be known very well to young technologists and entrepreneurs, right? It is things like hackathons. It is things like bounties. It is a thing like prize awards. It is a thing like we run the Hacking for Defense program, which embeds problems from real life DoD problems into college classrooms and capstone courses, so that those student teams can give those problems a fundamentally different multidisciplinary look and provide feedback to the department in ways that we just never would have thought of solving those problems, and not because folks in the DoD are bad people, and not because they're lazy people, and not because they're stupid people, but because I think as is human nature, you spend 15 years thinking about the same thing, and a certain level of non-intended myopia can start to set in, and I think what are certainly central to our theory of the case for defense innovation is this idea of, if you want different solutions, you have to get different problem solvers to the table. You can't invite the same folks that have been trying to solve these things year after year after year. You have to get different people to the table. And that really is what NSIN is designed to do. You asked a little bit about where we are, and I'll take that in the literal sense. So our headquarters is located here in Arlington. We're just down the street from Arlington, Virginia. We're just down the street here from the Pentagon, which is close enough where I can get there for meetings when I need to be, but far enough away where we're very pleasantly out of sight and out of mind for most of the work that we do. And it also affords, we're in a commercial office space, leased by the government. It also affords us the opportunity to meet more freely and openly with the kinds of folks that we really want to pull into our problem solving activity, right? You're not going to get, for very good reasons, P.S., you're not going to get five kids who have just started an early stage venture into the bowels of the Pentagon to do a meeting. You're just not going to do it, and why would they? So this is just a better environment for us, kind of out here, sort of on the economy, as it were. The other thing that is central to the network part of our name is critical. We really do have a physical network that we're trying to build across the country, and that's sort of rooted in this idea of 11 commercial innovation hubs, which are all the sort of standard cast of characters that you might expect: the Austins and the Bostons and the Chicagos of the world, Seattle, right? Also a couple non-standard, mixed in there. So we've got Durham, which of course the Research Triangle has been a startup hotbed for a while, but then we're going to put a commercial innovation hub in St. Louis. And we really do. So we've got 11 regions, 11 commercial innovation hubs where we have what's called a regional director that's responsible for kind of our multi-state presence. And then we establish what we call spokes, which is to fully embed a person on our team into a handful of top research universities throughout the country. And we're aiming for probably an objective number of somewhere around 35. We're at about just under a dozen right now. So we've got a little more growing to do. But we're in places like Boulder. We're in places like Boulder, Colorado. We're very soon going to be in Honolulu. We're very soon going to be in Tallahassee. We've got folks in Durham. We've got folks in Boston. We've got folks in Bloomington, Indiana. We've got folks in. We have someone in St. Louis right now at WashU, and kind of everything in between. So that's kind of the footprint, ever expanding footprint that we see for NSIN going forward. I don't know if that totally answers.
Perfect. That's you did great. That sets the ground for everything else.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Read my mind. One of the very interesting things as we get into sort of the different areas that you focus on in the NSIN. You talk about sort of the game-changing basic research that those guys do, big bets, whether it's cloaking an aircraft carrier or
sure.
invisibility or whatever they work on.
Yeah, no, that's right.
That
gravity
going to
take some cars. Yeah.
That stuff's going to take some time.
Yep.
You focus on what you call the fast little bets. End user drive them, fast solutions. And I was looking through just I was googling around at some of the things you're doing. You're in everything from improving the speed of medication dispensing at Fort Bragg to interesting technology related to the buoys that the Navy uses. Obviously, a lot of projects. You can't go through them all, but take us through these fast, quick little bets and things that you're quite excited about. If you can give us a few examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a great example. So we did a project with the Marine Corps, and this was probably about a year, probably just under 2 years ago. So we did a problem set with the Marine Corps, and it was sponsored by the Deputy Commandant of Installation and Logistics. And the bottom line was, the Deputy Commandant's question was, and really in a large part driven by kind of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and kind of the forward deployed footprint of U.S. forces over the last now almost a generation. But was really this idea of how to, given the advances in AI and given the advances in digital wearables, how can we get better at just-in-time logistics so that you're not sitting in a position where a forward-based platoon is in a firefight and doesn't or can't send their request for additional ammo or water or additional radio equipment or whatever the case may be until after they already need it, right? Is there a way to anticipate those requirements? And so bottom line is we got together with some students from the University of Southern Mississippi. We got together with some faculty from USM. We pulled together a bunch of folks, a bunch of end users from the Marine Corps, put this problem into a classroom, and then used some of the prototyping facilities that down in Mississippi, just south of Hattiesburg. And what we ended up with, based off that kind of iterative customer discovery process, that very lean kind of methodology that folks like Steve Blank and others talk about, is a wearable PED device that just sort of clipped to the vest of a Marine, who with four simple buttons that could be used to populate just by single button push where they were at in terms of their ammo, their water, their equipment. And then what am I missing? And then their own personal status, right? So medical status, i.e. if they've been wounded or whatever from their fighting position. So any number of just single touches populates a handheld device that was held by the rifle company commander, which would automatically populate this data to the brigade headquarters. And that brigade headquarters, based off of the data coming in from all of these positions, all of these multiple positions on the battlefield, based off of an AI algorithm that was developed at USM, was able to predict when supply drops would be needed before that they were actually needed, right? And all from a simple button push on a wearable PED that just clips to the vest. And I think what was exciting about it is that from the point at which the deputy commandant and his staff said, this is the problem that we face, this is the thing that we want to be better at, to the point where we had a usable prototype that Marines were out in the field, doing what Marines do and breaking them, right? But that's what we wanted, right? Like test and evaluate this thing, tell us where the weaknesses are so that we can make it ruggedized and we can make it usable for you in the field. From flash to bang, you were talking about a less than 12-month endeavor, thing one. To get to the cost of that prototype, you were talking about literally about a 16th of the cost from what the cost to the department would have been to take that idea, that capability gap, send it out, kind of out for open bid and contract with the primes, the big guys inside the defense industrial base, and then respond back with a proposal. So I mean, you're talking about the whole thing where we have a solution for less than 150K and under 12 months. And that same thing that I just talked to you about 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago, is now a program of record inside the United States Marine Corps. That is now a thing that the Marines are buying in bulk from the commercial entity that developed it, and are using it out in the field, out in the real world. And that's about a quarter of the time from sort of pain point discovery to technology in hand than most of the way the military is used to doing acquisitions.
Very efficient and very, very cheap. Yeah, that's
Well, and I think Ira, the key is, and you mentioned this with your own son, right? I think the key to the NSIN approach is there have been just phenomenal advances, not just in commercial technology, but in the technology utilized in the classrooms and in the startup and venture world, that if the DoD can just leverage those and then pivot them for a military application, we can see tremendous cost savings. And it's out there, right? We don't have to build it from scratch, and breaking the department of that mentality of we must build everything from scratch and to our specifications. That is the mental paradigm shift that the department really needs to start embracing, I think.
Wonderful. as you were mentioning the before the hubs, and you were pointing out sort of these areas in the United States which are hot in terms of
Sure.
traditional tech development and so forth. Once again, I was going through the list. I mean, you have dozens of universities that you now work with across the country. I think it mentioned something like you've either put money into or you're working with close to 200 different startups.
Yep.
Obviously. And you're not a venture capitalist per se, but you have to
Sure.
do some of these things. I mean, you have to go do
Sure.
your due diligence, and you have to go check the status of these projects.
No, absolutely.
Talk a little bit about sort of what that's like, and then second to that, I was just very interested, obviously, in some of these hubs, whether it's Silicon Valley or Boston. You have these specialties. Maybe Silicon Valley may be good at X, and Boston and Y. Are there any surprises that have popped up as you set up these different relationships that, wow, the folks in Iowa are really good at doing stuff for the defense?
Sure.
Any interesting stories on that front?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. So with respect to the former part of your question, sort of the adjacent to kind of VC work that NSIN finds itself engaged in on a pretty frequent basis, actually. Yeah. So for us, and I think that this is pretty common wisdom inside the venture capital community. A lot of this really does, and you mentioned it at the outset, Ira, right? Whether you're talking about a 4-person company, or you're talking about a 134-person organization like NSIN, government organization like NSIN, this fundamentally comes down to people. And so, what we end up doing a lot is assessing those teams, and oftentimes it's actually more about the teams than it is about the tech. And what I mean by that is, a technology that's interesting to the department that is being fielded by a early stage venture team, and we're talking about, sort of seed round or bootstrapping still, kind of with their own, funding from friends and family, that looks like, based off personalities, based off of objective career paths, based off what these folks want to do next, right? That looks like it's going to dissolve in 6 months is actually but has a really hot tech, is way less interesting to us than a mediocre tech that looks like it may break through a barrier, but would certainly move the needle, but has a really dependable team attached to it that we think is going to still be a company a year and a half from now. Because that really is what it's about. It really is about building out that sort of next generation of what the National Defense Strategy calls the national security innovation base, right? The sort of augmented, deep bench of startups and ventures and technologists that can augment the traditional industrial base, that the folks like Lockheed and Boeing and Northrop Grumman, who are either going to be integrated into those supply chains based off the novelty of the technology that they've developed, or are going to augment those supply chains based off of their own intellectual property. I think the other thing is we definitely I think we have I won't say different perspective, but I think we have some unique interaction with these teams, and I think that's largely because of the deeply early stage at which we hit them. And so, unlike, for example, a DIU, right, our higher headquarters, which is trying to take a commercial technology and pivot it into the military space, right? So take a company with an extant commercial market and sort of move them into a dual military market. We're kind of helping to build these companies from the beginning with that dual use application in mind. And so I think there's great advantage to that from the perspective of building already with that DoD customer in mind. Often results in shorter timelines to ultimately getting what we really need kind of in the hands of the end user. So I think that's where I'll leave it on the VC part, though of course happy to address any follow-on questions you might have. On the second part, remind me of the second part of your question.
I was just
the surprises.
If there was any interesting surprises, any interesting niches that we may one day call, wow, that's the Silicon Valley of the Defense Department.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'll tell you. So on that question, I think and I think you saw this maybe something akin to this sentiment in some of the material that we sent over to you.
Mm-hmm.
We really do. I mean, we really do believe this idea, on human capital, that talent is equally distributed by geography, by race, by sex, by ethnicity, by locale, right? And so as a statistical probability, what can happen in Boston should be possible in Akron, Ohio, or in Des Moines, Iowa, for that matter. And I'll tell you candidly, there are surprises out there, right? Like there are the one of the most successful hacking for defense teams that we have seen is a company called Lumini, which started out of Boise State, of all places. And this is now a team that has multi-million-dollar of both private and public investment, and is working closely with U.S. Special Operations Command with what is essentially see-through wall technology, which allows for special operators to be much better at their jobs and reduce collateral damage when they go out and do the thing that they're paid to do. It also has a ton of military, civilian applications, rather, when you're talking about search and rescue, when you're talking about construction, when you're talking about industrial project management, and so again, like if you had asked me, like, do I think one of our probably top 10 companies in the history of H4D would have come from Boise State? I would have said not a chance. I would have put my money on MIT. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the talent really is kind of equally dispersed like that. We haven't yet seen, to your exact question, we haven't yet seen any kind of tech vertical, if you will, that sort of emerged from a geographical area that has surprised us. But I think what has surprised us is the depth and breadth of talent in this country that is being left largely untapped by the DoD, and we're really excited that we're able to access that talent in a new way.
Excellent. I wanted to just take one other step, if we would, to you served at this role as a special advisor to the Undersecretary of Personnel and Readiness, and as part of that, obviously. Getting forces ready and preparing forces, obviously, for battle is one aspect of the Defense Department. But this, as we've talked about on the show, there's so much more that goes on in the Department of Defense. And one of the things, some of the areas that your department oversaw were things like health affairs, morale, recreation, quality of life. Any interesting projects that NSIN is working on with regard to some of these, and then specifically because we focus a lot on health and on the show, obviously the topic of so-called contract tracing with the COVID thing is everywhere, but it seems like such a hard thing to get done. I was wondering if you've had any interesting COVID contract tracing startups that have come into your office. Great question.
So with respect to personnel and readiness more broadly, So I mean, I think to me the most interesting topics are, I won't say necessarily health related, but I mean, you want to talk about like the very essence of a dual use application. It's digital health. It's biohealth. It's all of the things that sit in that space. So one of the things that we're really excited about is twofold. One of them is we've done a handful of projects related to COVID response, and as you can probably imagine, the vast majority of those have been related to ventilators, and obviously working with companies to fab and then prefab ventilator, both parts and then the full ventilation systems, or ventilator systems, I should say. We have a project ongoing with Washington University at St. Louis, for which the Defense Health Agency, which I used to work very, very closely with in my last life, is going to be sponsoring a series of problems around digital health and biohealth that are going to be where the project is going to be to work collaboratively with WashU, and who is a terrific medical school and terrific medical program. And really is going to be working with researchers, faculty, and staff out at WashU to identify essentially IP that sits inside WashU already, and WashU Medical School specifically, that can be commercialized and sort of pumped back into the department to solve specific DHA problems. The exact sort of problem sets are still under negotiation between the Defense Health Agency and WashU, but it's a really exciting endeavor to sort of combine these different parties the academic community, the startup element of that, of commercializing extant technology and then serving end user needs, dual use end user needs with the Defense Health Agency. To your specific question about contact tracing, to my knowledge, and in a way that I was actually just commenting on the other day, NSIN is now starting to get big enough where there are like daily things that transpire without my knowledge. So I'll put the qualifier that to my knowledge. I think we've only had one startup that has really had any good traction on the contact tracing part of this. But I think the hardest nut to crack, if you'll pardon the euphemism, I think is that you can have really great, elegant databases, and there are really great, elegant databases, but not just the voluntary nature, but the sort of user, that everything centers around the user inputting their data right into, so that to assist with contact tracing, like is the hard part. And absent any kind of technology, and right now I have not seen any kind of technology that is aware of ambient, essentially ambient presence in a room that could detect, potentially sick people and then catalog that could be accessed later in an archival way. I don't know that there's a way to expedite that. But so we haven't seen any breakthroughs, but we've definitely had a couple companies working on it.
Okay, I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, of course.
No, it's a hot topic.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Morgan, coming back to you, obviously you mentioned you've met many fascinating individuals so far.
Sure.
You mentioned the former Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, obviously President Obama. You mentioned your father as a very important influencer in your career so far. Any other folks, mentors, teachers, that have really helped along your path and kept you on this journey that you might want to mention, shout out to at this particular time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, definitely too many teachers. I would say I was one of these. There's a guy who works on my staff who says that DC is Hollywood for nerds, and I definitely agree with the sentiment. Yeah, I mean, I was one of these nerds who loved school, and so like the long list of teachers to whom I owe an enormous amount is probably too long to list on the time that we have together. I will say from a professional perspective, I think two folks that I would particularly call out that I haven't talked about already. One is a former battalion commander of mine named Chris Connolly, who was my battalion commander during my third deployment to Iraq. And in a lot of different ways, it was a little bit of a rough deployment. But one of the things that at the time, Chris Connolly, helped me understand. He gave me this, tons of people give you advice, kind of as you go throughout life, and some of it sticks and some of it doesn't, and it's the ones that stick that really carry with me. And one of the bits of advice that he gave to me very early on in my tenure as a company commander that I've always thought about is this idea of to be a leader and to sit in the role of leadership is to do the things that only you can do. And you owe that clear delineation of staying focused on the things that only you can make decisions about and only you can influence. You owe that as much to yourself as you do to the people who are working with and for you. Because a world in which you're making their decisions for them, right, or not appropriately delegating or not appropriately focused on those decisions which only you can make as a leader, it is a world in which you're failing your organization. Because it means that you're not focused on the things that the organization needs you to be focused on as the leader of that organization. And that was a really compelling piece of advice that has stuck with me through multiple jobs. The other person that I'll for sure give a shout out to, longtime mentor of mine, particularly during my years in the Pentagon, is a guy named Brad Carson, who served as the General Counsel of the Army. And then Undersecretary of the Army, and it was I first met Brad through his wife Julie. We were both in Ash Carter's front office together, and Brad kind of pulled me into the Undersecretary of the Army's office once I had made the transition to become an Obama appointee, kind of early in my appointee life. and then we did some time at personnel and readiness together. When I was up there, Brad was the acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, and we had a great professional working relationship, very, very hand in glove. But I said these words of advice. What Brad told me, he said it once while we were talking about Force of the Future, and the ways in which the department has to fundamentally change, and they're words that have just stuck with me ever since. Is if you're going to change something, you change it because you love it, not because you hate it. If the motivation for reform, for change, is coming from a place of hate or indignation or self-righteousness, you're fundamentally doing it for the wrong reasons. And not only will you probably fail, but you're doing a disservice to everybody around you. If you're going to try and change a thing, change it because you see a wrong in the world that needs righting, and you want that thing to be better because you love it so much. And that's really stuck with me. And I think, and I for sure have a reformer's heart. And there are certainly days where I walk into the Pentagon and I think to myself, tear all of it down. But it does come from a place of, I feel very deeply and very passionately about national security. I think governments, and I think the Department of Defense can be a place where real change happens. And I know for a fact that it's a place that really truly affects people's lives, and not just the men and women wearing the uniform. And so the kind of reform I'm after is definitely motivated from a place of love. And those are words that have stuck with me, and two people in particular that have been really, really special in my journey.
Wonderful, wonderful message. Really appreciate that. Very inspiring. Morgan, it's been very eye-opening. It's been an exciting discussion, and hearing about your journey, and really wishing you the best of this moving forward. It's a fascinating set of projects, and really best wishes and everything you're doing. And I really look forward to seeing. Hopefully, we can profile some of the tech startups that are coming out of it also on the show. But for everybody that's going to be watching on the YouTube channel or listening across the various podcast networks, you've been listening to Morgan Plummer, Managing Director, National Security Innovation Network at the United States Department of Defense, doing amazing things to make Department of Defense innovation cheaper, faster, and better. Morgan, thank you for taking the time to come on the show.